There
barely
he
walk
is.
right now. Yeah, hi.
It's okay. Hello.
Okay, you are all set.
All right. Welcome everyone to the LARC meeting on April 23rd, 2026. It's 6:31 for us to start. Roll call.
Kelly DeHaas,
She just said here, but she's muted.
Eric Pinkley,
Here.
Leanne Mankey,
Here,
Christopher Riley,
Here.
and AJ Tenyakos.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Peter is absent.
Yeah.
You have the agenda
AG.
there.
Mm-hmm.
This time. All right, so the next item on the agenda is public comment. Anyone online?
There's no one on Zoom.
All right, nothing at this time, Diane?
Nope. Wait.
She's gonna save till the end.
Save to the end. All right. All right, then the next item is to approve the prior meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as printed.
I'll
the
second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, again to the meat of tonight's, as many of you may have heard, I think I sent out the email as well. The presentation to town council has now been moved to May 12th instead of next Tuesday. So we have a couple more weeks to get everything in order for that. And I wanted to kind of spend tonight's meeting just reviewing, as I said, I'm up to Rev F of the presentation
Yeah,
of
this was
what I sent out. So, and I was just gonna, maybe just go through it. If anyone's got any more comments or feedback, I've been trying to incorporate it as I've been getting it in. As I said, I've gotten, feedback back, necessarily from the architect, Joe Salomon, I think had provided, some feedback, and just from various members, so.
And I'm still compiling. I know you asked for of the repairs that have been done in the last few years.
Yeah.
What were insurance claims? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we don't, like our database for
Oh.
insurance claims isn't by address.
Okay.
So unless I know the exact date of loss, and some of them would have been before I started here, so I don't know I don't know them inherently.
Okay.
So the insurance company is just auditing any property claims from that address, and I should have that report like within the next day.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm also just gonna bring up kind of a little bit of my notes on that just real quick.
On the maintenance.
No, on just on the presentation in general, because I knew there was, okay, so that was that part, and then I think Leanne followed up with the Anna Reynolds stuff, so I just
Yes,
have
I
to
did.
incorporate that. So these slides don't include those two items, but hopefully I can include them. I think the Anna Reynolds, I think we were not gonna necessarily include it in the presentation, but we were gonna have it as background information for the town
Yeah.
council when we get to the comparable side, so.
Yeah, a lot of it is good with the timeline and things like that, but one of the things I mentioned after talking to Steve is libraries are very different from fire departments, are very different from schools. So therefore, the square footage cost is specialized in some regards, or more areas required that isn't as specialized, depending upon, like, for example, a student square foot ratio.
Okay. Would you be able to bring up the,
I have it up, let me share it.
sure. Thanks.
Okay, I don't know, it's flipping paper.
Well, I'll be flipping. paper
You
too,
flip.
I can flip.
Okay. Did we lose people? I only see Eric. Or are they under that?
We're
It's
here.
their cameras off. You
Oh,
won't see them if they're just a black.
We don't have just a name. Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
okay, all right. So the first slide is, I'll update the date now that we have a more formal date on the presentation there, so we can go on to the second slide. As I mentioned with this presentation to town council, I'm trying not to focus on as much of the details we did from the first presentation, which was talk about the conceptual design, what we were planning to do. This slide kind of tries to summarize what's on there. I don't know if anyone in reviewing it has had any comments, anything that they would like me to highlight over some other things that I may have on there.
Our goal here is to inform and update, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right.
I think that goes, it highlights a few good points.
Okay. All right, so if we go to the next slide, once again, it's just to kind of align everyone to, okay, here's the concept design site plan and align them to the original. Not much different than what we showed them last February, so.
Right.
All right, so going to the next slide, this is one of the things I had added in there was an updated timeline. I actually had to break it into 2 slides just to kind of try to make it more readable. I had a kind of the pre-construction timeline, basically starting from May and continuing on for 20 months. And I put on the slide there the tasks that would be included in there, like pre-referendum tasks that were like meetings, conceptual design, cost estimates, any marketing that we have to do prior to that. It's kind of the community campaign that we've been talking about in parallel, as well as getting into once it gets through a referendum, getting into a schematic design development, and then creating some construction documents from that, because that information would then potentially be used for the subcontractor phase, which would be development of bid documents and creation of subcontractor bid. This timeline, as I show it here, obviously it'll shift around depending on when the when it actually would go to a referendum. I just want to kind of give a sense of, okay, it's going to be this many months, and I just put a timeline, just kind of, okay, we're, say we start the task, now when we present to you. So, and as I mentioned in there, because one of the comments, I believe, maybe it was you, Leon, that had asked about the subcontractor phase, the bidding seemed to be shortened, like they had like 2 months.
That's more abbreviated because by then you have more finalized drawings, whereas in the beginning portion, particularly when you're dealing with referendum and pre-construction and then construction management, there's a lot of design phase and you're going from conceptual to actual building drawings.
Yeah.
Typically, you're going to have your trades, your subcontractors come in when there is a hard and fast drawing to go by. So
Yeah.
it's a little quicker.
Yeah. So that was just what I wanted to kind of note in there in case someone's wondering, well, you only have subcontractor bidding for like, a couple months there. So I'm just looking for, is there any comments that anyone has on this slide? Any other information that we should put on this part? Keep in mind, as I said, I think the next slide I do the second half of the timeline, which is the actual construction and the closeout of the project.
No, I think that looks reasonable.
All right, so if going to the next slide, as I said, I broke down to construction, showing that it's a 22-month construction period, which I believe lines up with what we had previously stated to town council. And closeout just basically includes completion of any final project documents, closing any open actions, just given a couple of months after construction is complete to, get everything all set.
Just for a reality check, 2 months is about right for punch list, but in terms of document closeout, it's more like 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not anybody in the building, but it's all the
Yeah.
follow-up.
Yeah, okay. All right. Now, the only thing that I was also questioning I put on here was the timeline is based on a November 2026 referendum. And I know, and I want to put there, any changes to that referendum date will shift the schedule and completion date. We've been kind of discussing a little bit, as well as, whether or not, it should be on the November referendum or not. The only question being on that is to kind of give enough time to potentially do more communication to the public, getting, potentially more, fundraising, time in there, because once we start on the referendum path, our communication, kind of gets locked down I believe.
Library board does.
Library board does. So, so I know that's been kind of under discussion. So I put the note on there that this timeline was based on that date for referendum. But, and the time frame will stay the same, but it may shift depending on if the referendum is this year or next year or, anything beyond that. So.
The other impact on time is, and we'd have to have an answer whether we're gonna go forward with referendum or not, obviously from council's determination. We have to have, if we're gonna apply for the Connecticut Library grant, which is a substantial amount of money, $1 million to $2 million, we have to have our letter of intent into June, and we have to have the final documents into them by August. And then if it's approved at referendum, they'll consider it when it gets to bonding, whether they'll recommend it for bonding to the governor. So the timeline on that is we'd have to have at least our letter of intent into June, into them in June.
Which would be basically a month after we present our update here to town council. So that's what another consideration that we are looking at.
It's doable. It's just a little bit of a crunch.
Mhm.
So I don't know if there's any more discussion on this slide or any more discussion on, as I said, whether, we try to give ourselves more time to get the public communication out there and fundraising and give us time for the library grant, or whether, we, push through for this year. So I don't know if that's a topic of discussion for now, or whether, something we want to, think about while we're.
Why don't we finish and then talk?
Yeah, I think so.
So
Sorry.
I'm
Yep,
just gonna
go
make one comment on here. So I get it. You said what happens if we do nothing, rising maintenance costs. But your graph from 2024 to 2025 looks like it actually goes down. So I don't know if you want to put a projected 2026 if you do nothing, because otherwise, or something like that.
Okay.
I know you can't look into the future, but you can.
Yeah,
kind of-
as I said, it's.
I don't know that the graph is effective. I think the graph is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Kind of, I
Yeah,
guess.
I
It's
mean,
just
if,
like,
if you talk about the dollar amount, $250,000 is a lot of money.
yeah, you could just throw up numbers rather than showing a graph.
Rather than a graph.
Okay, because I know at one time we talked about having a graph for it and everything, and I do agree it decreases slightly, or I was trying to talk to her like, okay, it's kind of level a little bit,
Yeah.
even though it goes down a little bit, but.
But if you look at where the problem is, it is misleading because it's leveling out on a line versus look what the actual dollar amount, what it's indicating is.
Yeah,
Well, and I think a more accurate reflection of what you're trying to get across would be some type of graph or graphic that shows the things that we need to put in CIP that we keep putting off because we don't know what we're doing with the building. So there's camera upgrades, security upgrades, HVAC system that needs to be, there are things that the facilities director brings to us when we are doing the CIP review and the budget review of things that need to be funded. So I think that would be more accurate.
So it'd be better suited from you or from Joe?
Joe would have the hard numbers, so let's reach out to Joe and have
Okay.
him help us get those numbers.
okay, so basically going out to him for what kind of,
What capital projects does he have active dollars for? And
Okay.
he'll be able to,
Or on the timeline, the projected timeline of what is gonna have to,
Yeah.
either has been delayed or is gonna come up in the next few years.
Yep.
Mhm.
he has, I can tell you he'll have most of that readily available.
okay. All right. So from what it sounds like is, it sounds like having that information and maybe that
Instead of the graph.
instead of the graph would be, okay. I was fine with that. When I got the recommendation for the graph and then I put the graph in, I'm like, okay, that doesn't really show what I really want, so.
It's tough when you got 2 data points on a graph.
Yeah, it doesn't really show much unless it's a real steep
Yeah,
change.
right.
All right. And as I said, I do have a blank on there for the insurance claims. I think Lauren had mentioned about that, so.
Yep.
I think that if there's no other comments, I mean, I can.
Well,
continue on.
I just had one question
Sure.
to make sure I'm understanding.
Yep.
The concerns that we've had with work orders, et cetera, did those numbers include the insurance or is that a plus number?
I believe that those numbers included the insurance.
Okay.
So That's why I'm going to get the insurance figures.
Okay,
And
'cause
then
I didn't want to make the assumption we were doing an add-on, or if it was part of.
No, that $250,000 includes insurance.
Okay,
It includes insurance claims, so there is a portion of that that we pay for because we have a $10,000.
well, you paid for it through the
deductible.
premiums too, so.
But yeah, so there is a portion of every claim that we end up paying for out of the
Right,
reserve
right,
because we have a deductible, so I will get you the breakdown of all of that.
All right. Any others before? No, that's all right. Next one, thanks for the picture, Leanne. I just.
It actually looks pretty good in that picture. If you get close, it's
I-
not good.
I was debating of what pictures to kind of use to best show, but,
Overall,
so this was just showing another example of the maintenance costs that we have, the Churchill door restoration. So I put in the total cost for it. I mentioned in here because, Joe, had mentioned that previously. I think he had, said that there might
be some money in his historical CIP that he'd be able to put toward it. Certainly not the full amount, and we had to contract for the whole thing as a
Yeah.
library. We applied for a grant, 1772 grant, but we still don't have an answer on that. We may have an answer before since we're now May 12th. We
Yeah.
might have an answer about whether we've got that or not.
by that point.
But at the most, that would be 10,000 of the 38,300. But if we don't, it's literally that, like you see the little knob at the top there, the little finial, that's already fallen off. That's currently in Lisa's office in a box.
All right. So the next one was talk about the HVAC. What I had made updates since last time was, I think, Joe had wanted to make sure that we talked about that. The old design imposed, restrictions and everything, but there have been replacements. There have been updates that have been made since, but it's still, as I said, it's still, the system is still has imbalances and other issues associated with it as we continue to have to maintain it. Every year there's usually several items I see on there for HVAC for something to be replaced, either a motor or some other part of it, so.
It's almost impossible to balance the system. That was the business I was in, and 15 years ago, we were in the library trying to balance it. You can't balance old to new. It just isn't working. Even with new pieces and parts, it's just not gonna work.
So here, this hadn't changed since one of the previous revisions I had. It was just basically listing out the maintenance in 2024 and 2025. Try to pick out some of the unique and major items.
Mhm.
So then we also included a slide in here to talk about that, there's grants available for services, programs, and technology that the library can't use because we have lack of existing space. So the example we brought up that one time was, a 3D printer. It'd be great to apply for a grant for that, but where would we put it? And would we have to kind of wheel it out every time someone wanted to use it and that type of thing? So we wanted to kind of include a slide to just kind of point out that, hey, we could have grants that, reduce costs and help the public's interest, but we don't have the space to even put the stuff, so. All right, this slide basically was talk about the losing the ability to control cost escalation, given several examples of increases in cost. I think I've had this mentioned before, but in this case, I think one of the follow-up items I had was to find out what the cost escalation that was in there, and the cost escalation that was used for the cost estimate that we had in there was 4% annually. But it continues to be monitored because obviously, the situation today, things can change, but that's currently the one that was used for the cost estimate. And just kind of keep stressing that, the more it's delayed, the more the cost estimate will increase. There's, it's not gonna go down, so.
No, and in recent years, it's typically 4 to 8%. And in the last couple of years, it's been anywhere between 10, 15, and some, depending upon what kind of building, 20%. Now, that is an anomaly, but
Yeah.
4% difference is still a huge differential.
If they ask you, what the LED is.
Oh, lead, yeah,
Just as a qualifier, you know.
yep,
Oh, to define it, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, just as a just you know.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting about, for example, the lead is to apply for that grant, when we were looking at it 2 years ago, LEED was something that was suggested but not required. Now to apply for that grant, it's a requirement of the grant. So as we move forward, there are requirements that come out of not only statutory regulations, but if we're going looking for monies elsewhere.
all right, so then this was just a transition slide to the review of options, so talk about the phasing considerations. I don't think there was much change to this particular slide from what I had before. I think it was one of the next slides.
I think it's the next one.
Yeah, it's the next one. So the next one was where, I think the comment came up about the options, how we had options, facing considerations for starting on the first floor and building or starting on the second floor and building, and each one kind of came down to safety of our patrons. So rather than putting them in as phasing considerations, because they're not really necessarily things that we're considering for phase, they're, you know, I put them more of as a statement on this slide, just saying that, you know, with the demolition and the building of additional space, you know, it's safety is gonna be a major concern, so it wouldn't be feasible to do the construction of it in phases with, while still in operation as a library. And that was just kind of what I was stressing on this slide versus including it on, I think on one of the next slides, I list a couple of the options that, you know, we could phase.
One of the other problems with phasing the actual construction of the building is one of the problems that we already have in the current building, which is an HVAC system. If that phasing is any kind of differential in terms of several numbers of years, which is a good possibility, because
If you go to the next slide.
oh, sorry.
No, it's all right.
I didn't look in the next page apparently. Okay.
But you please continue.
Well, I was gonna say, it doesn't, you're back to that, jerry-rig system that isn't integrated and built as one. So trying to balance the system is next to impossible. While you may have updated equipment, it doesn't work well together.
So that's what I tried to capture on this particular slide about the HVAC system. Just saying one continuous time frame would be allowed to make it, you know, one continuous system. You don't have to kind of connect disparate systems each time that you're starting again and connecting again. But phase it would require each section to be connected, and then there could be possibility of changes of material, construction, or even permits between phases. So I tried to capture that in that slide as well.
I
to say, no,
apologize, I
this is-
apparently missed
No,
the page.
Not a problem, no problem. I'm trying to make sure I include everything. So then, as I said, I updated this phasing consideration slide that just basically reduced it down to the exterior spaces reduced, eliminated, but I also stress that that does not include parking in the reduction and elimination, because that's, I'll say, one of the key selling points of a lot of the outside stuff. And then I just added also just a phasing consideration for interior spaces built but left unpopulated. So basically, you know, if you have like a maker space or something like that, you know, you build out the square footage so that we have it available, and then we can look in the future, you know, even potentially for grants for that equipment that we couldn't apply for before. Now that we have the space, we can get the equipment and the furniture and everything else that would be needed in there. So, and that's what I mentioned in my note down there. I don't know if anyone's had any questions or comments on that.
When we're talking exterior spaces, the one thing there is we potentially could pursue, like, for example, the plaza that we have on the side of the building, or some of the pavilion work or things like that. That would be something that we could pursue grant-wise, or to actually potentially get a larger sponsor to really go after it that way. It's not ideal, but it would be a ways to take some of the cost off.
But then this is where I mentioned about transition plan. I don't believe much had changed since the previous time that I had a revision on this. Yeah, just looking it over real quick. I think it was the same as what it was before.
I think this page is. The swing space.
All right, so then the next one, as I said, I don't believe this has been changed either, but it just, based off of, discussions with Lisa, I'd gotten, I'll say the most popular programs, so they, were trying to prioritize those to be offered during the construction phase. And, as well as just looking for alternate locations to hold various programs. And as I said, services would be prioritized depending on what swing space, would be available at that particular time. Okay. Secondary locations, I don't believe this has changed much. I mean, we had included there examples of current potential areas, but obviously, when construction actually, is set to start, as it gets closer, that's when, we'll have to look to see what's still available and what's still vacant that we could potentially provide library services out of.
Yeah, and obviously we'll have to see when we get there what the market will dictate at that time and what's available.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The one good thing about it is that the library staff itself has been working to cull the collection so that we're not moving things that are, something that we really don't need in our collection. That was something that was recommended by the library review consultants as to making it more feasible as to what we move, what we store, that type of thing. So that's been something that's been in process now for a couple of years. So that makes it a little easier when we go to that point.
So then, library expansion options, this basically stayed about the same, except for I added on to option 3, I just mentioned new construction. I think that was a comment that we received from, I believe, the architect, I think had mentioned
Yes,
when
when we
we
met,
had the
yeah.
options.
It's a small bump out type
Yeah,
of thing. It's nowhere near the size of what we had before.
but just to make sure that people
Yeah.
don't understand, it's just not just renovating the one building.
Right.
All right, and then going over these options, I don't believe anything had changed on here. I tried to include, that I mentioned on here about the LEED silver being a requirement for the Connecticut State Library grant. So I, included that at the bottom of here, but beyond that, I think everything else mainly stayed the same. And then on here was, the cost of the various options. I once again included the cost escalation on this slide just to kind of reiterate, what went into determining the total construction cost. I also updated the estimated completion date, but I did it based off of the timeline that was presented earlier. Obviously, if that shifts, that, completion date, moves around as well, so. And then I also added the note in here that, each option may include a phase component where the next phase would need to be funded in the future. So for example, if you're not doing the exterior spaces, well, that's gonna have to be, funded in the future. Now, whether it's funded through grants, sponsorships, some other means, that's different, but we just want to make sure that they understand that, okay, if the cost is up here for the various options, there may be stuff taken out of it that would have to come back in at a future time. And project comparables, I don't think I had changed too much on this. The only thing I had updated on this slide was I had gotten updated numbers for the cost per square foot so that it's more aligned with what the library estimate.
$10.
Yeah, today's dollars. So. And as I mentioned with the project comparables too, is that with the action for the Anna Reynolds, I think we're just going to keep that information kind of in our back pocket to also include so that, when people are looking at it, they can see that, something local, something that they know, are familiar with and everything. If they ask about more about the comparables, we can say, well, this was what Anna Reynolds was, which was, one of the largest projects we had in town recently.
What's the largest project we've ever done?
We've ever done. All right.
I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit on this one, the project comparables.
Yep.
I think it would be helpful if you put in here the year that the projects were done.
Sure.
And note that that's been brought to comparative numbers.
Correct.
Okay.
Cause that was gonna be my next question,
Okay.
are these dollars that
We
they
had
spent
them-
5 years ago? Because today's dollars would be different, right?
Well,
Yeah,
that's,
no,
these numbers have been allocated,
Adjusted.
adjusted to reflect today's dollars.
I think make note of that, so that they know that this really
Yeah.
is apples.
yeah, I can certainly add to each of these projects the year that it was completed. And then I'll just have a note on the bottom that says, you know, costs
Or
adjusted,
you can even
adjusted,
put it
already
in your,
adjusted.
can you
to
put it in your
this.
column here?
You can put it
Comparative
under-
number,
Yeah,
today's dollars?
yeah.
Yeah, I could do some.
Yeah, you may
Then
want
you-
to put the original cost and then just
Yeah, you could actually, if you have room for another column, can you do the original?
apply your inflation and
And then now you're adding two columns, I know, but,
No, that's all right. I'll figure it out.
but that way, that the people will have the information in front of them and they're less likely to start getting confused.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. No,
That's a
no
good
problem.
point.
Yeah.
The
Especially,
problem
especially
is
the
that we've
year
been
was
living
on, yeah.
it, so we just assume
Well,
everybody.
I'm trying to look at this more of a lens of like, if I were a member of the public and I didn't know as much as everybody else did, you know, what would jump out at me?
And now I've reduced the requested action slide to basically providing feedback to Lark regarding the various proposed options. Just so that we can kind of see where we stand with it. I had removed about the referendum and stuff from this particular slide. I just wanted to kind of be able to see, okay, you know, what do you feel about the other options? You need more information, and that can kind of guide, you know, where we go from there, so.
Well, the one thing is, I think, and, you know, grant you, we have, as a library and as Lark, been living and breathing this, so, I think we've come back and addressed a lot, if not all of the questions that were asked a year ago in February. The question of the referendum is really, it all falls to the council too, as to timing and bonding and all that other stuff as well. Obviously, library and then in turn Lark, we would love to go forward with the project, but we have to take the guidance that council comes back with. And what does the council have an appetite for it? And do they think the public has an appetite for it? We don't wanna go and do something that maybe is premature and then we lose ground, but we also don't wanna lose steam either by moving forward, so, I mean.
And I think that by having the requested action being provided feedback, that kind of helps us drive what direction we would be going in at that point, so. All right, I think that's the last slide. Any other thoughts on the presentation slides? As I said, I wrote down some of the notes and I'll make a Rev G, I guess, of the document and send it back out to everyone to take a look at.
yeah, I just think those general tweaks and just I'm sure you guys have practiced this at least once or twice, so I'm sure you'll continue to do that. Move it forward.
For the
My
presentation.
only thought on
Yep.
the final slide where you're talking about feedback
Yep.
regarding the options, that's the only thing on that slide. So either be prepared to kind of go back to the slide where the options are outlined or kind of copy it into there. Because I know for me, if you're like, oh, feedback on the options, I'm going to ask you to bring those options back up and have them right in front of me.
Okay, yep. I'm sure there'll be like, okay, well, you know, can you go back to this slide? I have a question on that as we're going through, so.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
more than just the four options, really. It's also talking about timing. That's part of the discussion as well. It's
Yeah.
not just moving forward on one of the four options.
Also determining when.
When.
we can.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think the next item on the agenda was just,
Sorry.
sorry, no problem. It was other business permit committee, so I guess, do we want to discuss or do we want to just present and then get the feedback and let that drive where we go from here for the referendum for this year, or whether we get feedback that it's moved out or it's this year.
Personally, I feel the committee, as well as the facilities committee at the library and their work leading to what comes into Lark. This has been a solid endeavor since the questions arose last February. That doesn't mean we can't keep doing it, but I think what we have to come out of on that May 12th is we need guidance from the council of where the feeling is. I mean, I don't want to see it come to a halt. Unfortunately, the LARC committee has been in existence since 2015. I don't want to see us put in the back burner again. I'd like to still be relevant and stay on top of this. But I think we need guidance from the council as to whether we're moving forward for a fall referendum, or if there's other options that they wish us to pursue, or more questions that are generated from this presentation. But I still think that LARC itself is relevant and should continue forward, because at some point, the library needs to have the work done.
Yeah.
So whether, it's within the constraints of the next year or so, like I said, I think we have to come back and ask the council, where do you want us to go with this? But in the meantime, still keep working at it. I don't
Yeah.
want to see us dissolved or anything.
Yeah, no, as I said, I mean, that's why we're presenting the update. We're trying to get all, we're still doing our parallel effort of communications to the public. So, trying to pursue and move everything forward. And then, as I said, like you said, it's really, that's really what that slide is gonna be is, okay, are there more questions that, we have to come back and answer, or are there more options we have to look at? Are we okay to proceed for November referendum? Is there, anything else that's required? I think May 12th will be key determining, of how we're proceeding or something like that. I mean, I don't think we're gonna change how we're proceeding right now, between now and then anyways, to doing this, because, it's all in preparation to provide this update and then get the information out there and then kind of figure out what's the direction from there.
Well, the one thing that it doesn't necessarily have to be part, because it's not part of LARC per se. I don't know whether we want to update the council and the public, but primarily the council, the efforts that the library is taking to educate the public regarding programming, challenges, various things. There's a concerted effort between videos and Facebook and other things that we're trying to expand the exposure so that people know that it's more than just you can get a book at the library. And there is definitely a concerted communication effort to get out there and, for better or worse, let the public know about what we do and what our needs are and what we can provide to the public. So that's something that is being worked on, but obviously that's a never-ending battle. But exposure is something that we're working to increase, and understanding of what goes on at the library.
I mean, it's basically trying to be informational to the public that may not normally use the library. I mean, the people who normally use the library know what it offers and what it can do.
She has a comment.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
I have to leave, so I didn't want, if I got up and left, I didn't want anybody to think that I was upset. I think you guys are on the right track. The presentation looks good. I think you have to be careful what you ask for, because without having all of that advertising and that pull through in the community, if you go to referendum after the budget meetings that we've had, you're failing. But to your point, we've put so much work into this. LARC needs to exist, and we need to keep moving forward and see where we are a year from now. But I think that the library and LARC, you need to do that advertising and push through. And I'm so sorry to have to jump in, but again,
I think you're doing great work. I do have a picture of the old door a couple of years before in that door there, if you wanted to show what happens when you do nothing over a period of time.
How would
But
you
I
feel?
almost feel like our biggest challenge this time is that we're saying two stories. We're saying, we have to do this, the sooner the better, but we don't want to go in front of the community in November because we're not ready with the climate that's there. And I think that's your biggest challenge as Lark right now. Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah, I think the council is going to have to, give us some guidance and direction of how they
Yeah.
feel about it truthfully, and so we can move forward one way or the other.
Yeah,
I mean, we have to deal with the reality of things. I mean,
Right.
after Tuesday and setting a mill rate after a reevaluation, many people have sticker shock. So we also have to think about, even if we had the most perfect plan, we have to think about impact and what the response will be. And that's not necessarily for us to consider. We're putting it forward, but council has to consider whether it's a worthwhile effort. So I mean, I'm not elected to lead this. They are, lucky them.
Mhm.
I mean, as I said, I think it would be good to just also just like you said, just bring up the fact that, we have been trying to bring it forth to the community. I mean, recently we've also been working on surveys that, we're going to be sending out to various organizations and groups so that we can, it's twofold. It basically provides you information about services you may not be aware the library has. But on the other hand, it's also trying to gather information from them of, okay, what services and programs would you like to see that you don't
Yeah.
currently have that would help you, so.
And we've already started that it's growing and it's in its infancy, but we've gone out to a couple of groups and we've had the responses back. And as we gain more information, we're tweaking it and improving the questioning and surveys, et cetera, as well as the presentations.
Sounds good.
All right,
We got our public comment already.
yeah.
Unless somebody else is on,
There is no one else online from the public.
Okay,
okay?
all right. Does anyone else have any other comments presentation wise, or how we're pursuing various things right now, or?
No, I think it looks good. I mean, there's a couple of minor tweaks and, move forward.
Yeah.
See what we get, the feedback we get.
Okay.
I think Lauren has some very good points about reading it cold. It's hard to edit yourself.
Oh, yeah, that's why I put it out there and I sent it out to everyone else, because I'm like, I've been staring at this thing for a while. I can't
Well,
I can't figure out what else to change.
And because we've been so integrally involved, I know what you mean. So I'm not the best person,
Right.
as does most of the people on the committee, so.
All right. Well, if that's the case, then I think, look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, who's in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night, guys.
All right, we'll see ya.
Thank you, counselors. I appreciate your efforts. I don't envy you.
Yeah, long hours there, I saw.
All right. Good night.
Good night. I don't even want to look on Facebook.